Shame. 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 Shame.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Red Devil's Den podcast. As you can see, Reese and Josh aren't here, so I'm stepping in with guest hosting duties. We're going to talk about the Burnley match and just that, really, since there's no midweek fixture. But obviously, yesterday the news of the European Super League broke, and that's kind of reprogrammed our podcast for today. We're going to primarily focus on that. But before we go ahead and get started with our group discussion, I just want to provide the facts of the situation as they are right now. And keep in mind, the situation is constantly evolving, so they may change by the time you listen to this. But as things stand, the situation is that the clubs have been talking to each other and to UEFA for some time about reforming the Champions League. The big clubs wanted more money, more control, and more paths in when they miss out on qualification, like United have done before, or Arsenal have been doing the past few years, and Juventus are at risk of doing right now, for example. So in the past week, UEFA cut a deal with them with a new Champions League format to provide them more money, more safety net, and basically try to stave off any kind of Super League proposal, which they've been threatening for some time. The new format of the Champions League is what they call the Swiss model, and basically it would start in 2024. It would be one 36-team league that would replace the current group stages, and every team would play 10 matches. Each team would play 5 at home, 5 away, and then the opponents would be seeded for that. How exactly, they haven't said. And then the result of this would basically be that you'd get 10 group stage kind of replacement matches, and then you'd have some qualification towards the round of 16, and things would go from there. The big change for the other than the format in terms of qualification is the 4 added teams. Those would be an added place for the 5th league, so that would be 4th place in France would get a Champions League spot. Another champion from another league would get an automatic qualification, and then 2 more spots based on what's called UEFA coefficient rankings, which is to say there are basically 2 spots to save teams that miss out on Champions League through their own leagues. So if United are a historical team, for example, and we finish 5th, then we would get upgraded to the Champions League as one of those 2 spots. So that was the discussion, and to stave off the Super League, it was agreed. And then Agnelli, who's the chairman of Juventus, and Ed Woodward, who is obviously the United chairman, they signed off on that, but at the same time, they were planning this Super League behind the backs of UEFA. And then on Sunday, so yesterday, they announced their Super League, which is 12 clubs: Atletico Madrid, Barca, Real Madrid, Juventus, both Milan clubs, and the Big Six in the Premier League. And then they've tried and failed to get Bayern Munich, Dortmund, Leipzig, Porto, and PSG to join them. Those 5 clubs have said they're sticking with the Champions League system so far. The vision is to have 15 permanent teams and 5 qualified teams invited in yearly. It'd be very similar to EuroLeague basketball, if anyone follows that. And the idea is you'd have 2 groups of 10, each team playing home and away. The top 3 in each group would qualify for the quarterfinals. 4th versus 5th would play playoffs for the last 2 spots. The tournament would ideally start this summer, and they would play their games in midweek. Now, this is where things get interesting if you've been following along so far. The Super League teams want to stay in their domestic leagues. It might threaten the cups because of fixture congestion with the amount of games the Super League would play, but they do want to stay in the Premier League, Serie A, and La Liga. All of the clubs have left the ECA, which is basically the lobbying group for the clubs in Europe towards UEFA. Now, what's happened since is UEFA, FIFA, leagues, and governments have all said they're against this proposal. They've threatened lawsuits, removing them from the FIFA games, banning them from every other competition, including their domestic leagues, which the Super League does not want, and blocking the players from playing in international competitions. The Premier League clubs are meeting tomorrow without the Sinister Six, and similar meetings are taking place in other countries. UEFA are currently talking to their lawyers about expelling these teams that are left in competition from the current European Cup. So United and Arsenal would be kicked out of the Europa League, and City and Chelsea would be kicked out of the Champions League, as well as Real Madrid, if that meeting with the lawyers is successful tomorrow. So now that we have an understanding of the system and kind of the changes and how things have been going, I want to go ahead and just go straight for reaction. Let's start with Vin. What do you think?
Yeah, sorry, I've just been catching up on some of the latest quotes, and there have been a lot of figures having floated around in in these like past 4 or 5 hours, and I've just received another quote, which has come straight away from Fabrizio Romano's podcast, saying that even the players had no idea about the idea of the Super League. They're reaching out to Fabrizio Romano to find out more. So this just goes to show that the owners of these clubs have been absolute snakes. They've gone behind the players, they've gone behind the managers, they've gone behind the staff members who've been working there for 30, 40 years, and they've just undone everything that the teams that in this case United have been working on for the past 2 years. Absolutely undone everything. And yeah, I can't believe it. The game's gone. The game's gone to the dirty dogs. We knew this, but we just didn't know that it would go down. It would go up to such a level. And there are also confirmed sort of quotes coming out that this idea of Super League is being purely driven by a bunch of American owners. That is the Glazers from United, it's Kroenke from Arsenal. Um, who's the other American owner? John Henry of Liverpool, and then they've gotten Florentino Perez because of his stature and reputation in Europe, and they've flouted the idea, and being the greedy man he is, he's agreed. Okay, I'll hop on this. I'll become the chairman. So be it. And wow, just unbelievable. You look at the figures that are just floating around. 6 billion in debt finance. JP Morgan, who coincidentally was an ex-employer of Ed Woodward, where he was an investment banker before he brokered the deal for the Glazers in the United takeover, is now debt financing the entire Super League. 6 billion, and clubs are going to receive 3.5 billion, which is going to be split amongst the founder clubs, which are supposed to be 15, but now it seems like they're finding it very hard to get 3 additional clubs to join them, as we've seen. Borussia Dortmund, Leipzig, Porto, they all refuse to join in on this, as well as have PSG and Bayern Munich. So wow, it's just unbelievable. There's a whole bunch of numbers which I don't want to get into because it doesn't make sense. Because the whole ethos, the whole point of this entire idea is just a farce. And yeah, if the Premier League wants to ban Manchester United from the competition for the foreseeable future, so be it. I know this is gonna cause a lot of controversy, but this is not what us as fans have been supporting the club for. The history, the legacy, it's all gone to tatters. And I'm sorry, if it means relegation, if it means being expelled from the league, so be it.
Absolutely. We'll get on more to what this means for United and how we feel about the club and how maybe the authorities should respond in a little bit. But as far as your initial reaction goes, Apollo, please let us know. What do you think?
It's just a betrayal of the fans. It's a betrayal to all of us who've supported them for essentially all of our lives since we were old enough to really have a club. They've just done it out of the blue. The managers didn't know it. The players didn't know it. We didn't know it. And even we were reading about there was a fan forum a few days ago with Ed Woodward, and he mentioned nothing about it, despite the fact he promised to keep the fans in the loop of everything that was going on with UEFA negotiations in the past. It's just he's acted like a complete snake, and I, for one, if it does go ahead, I won't be supporting the club in it. I can't justify that in the Super League. I think you have to draw the line somewhere, and that's the line for me.
Absolutely. You can tell from the emotion in your voice how challenging this past 24 hours has been for you, as it has been for us all. Just it's been shocking and just hard to cope and see what this means for the club we love and have supported our entire lives moving forward. Dan, just what do your initial reaction before we move on to some more specific discussion?
It just feels like a massive slap in the face, amid everything that's going on for a lot of people, myself included. I put a tweet out the other day regarding my own mental health issues. It's been escapism, it's sort of kept a lot of people going during the uncertain times that it is now. And it was just a massive letdown. We've always hated the Glazers, but at times it's been bearable. Like recently, it has sort of been more bearable than it has been in the past. And you know, with the restructure they've done, you know, brought Ollie in, finally got a director of football, Darren Fletcher, things like that. You sort of looked at the club and you perceived them to be going in the right direction. And I probably foolishly thought, bought into that and thought maybe they're going to start doing things the right way. And then obviously this comes out and they're sort of going against all of that, and all of this planning was, you know, with this Super League in mind. And, you know, as a fan of this club from the day I was born, there's pictures of me at 2 days old in a Manchester United baby grow. You know, like supporting the club for as long as I can remember is all I've ever known, and it's always been part of my schedule. And it just sort of, as a fan, it just sort of makes you sit there and think, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do now? Football was a massive part of my life. I've got a massive Manchester United title on my leg, and you know, like this, the Glazers and Woodward, they've got me sitting here contemplating washing my hands with my club, the club that I've loved my entire life. I'm getting quite emotional now, so I do apologise. You know, it just shows how much of a shock it was, and the fact that last night at 11:20 on a Sunday evening, they put this out on their app. They don't put a tweet out, and they put it out on the app, and they don't give it a push notification. So no one gets a notification for this. I only found out about this because people went on the app and they told me that they'd done this. That's disgusting. It is, because it shows that they've done it in an extremely sly and seedy way. That, oh yeah, we're doing this, but we're just going to hide it away in this little corner of the internet. You can go there and read it if you like, rather than, you know, just saying it with their chest, I guess, essentially. It's just really knocked me for six, and it's just really hard to sort of collect your thoughts when a massive part of your life is about to potentially change completely. And, you know, like Apollo, I mean, it's going to be a bit of mental gymnastics in regards to my support of the club, because it's something that I've always done throughout my entire life and something that I've always known. So for a lot of fans, I mean, that's the people that's going to affect. It's the fans. It's a massive life change. It's not just a change in a hobby or an interest, because a lot of us, including everybody here, Manchester United, a massive part of our lives. We talk about on the podcast about it. We read about it every day. You know, so the whole thing's, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I can again see the emotion from you as well. And we're all on the same page here. The Super League proposal has no support from us or the vast majority of fans that I've seen on social media or in person. There have been protests outside of Anfield. People have put up signs, RIP Liverpool, up until death of 2021. They don't want to be in the Super League. Similar, there's been created by the poor and stolen by the rich signs at Old Trafford. Chelsea fans are supposedly planning a protest during their match tomorrow. This isn't just about United. No proper fan of their club is satisfied with this. And as Dan said, the United have meant so much to us as an American fan. For me, I grew up in California on the West Coast, which meant that the early kickoffs were at 4:30 in the morning. And when I started watching United, I was young, and my dad kind of watched a little bit, but he wasn't a huge fan. He wouldn't get up early for the matches. But for me, it was a committed part of my life. And, you know, at 10, 11, 12 years old, I remember, you know, faking that I was sick so I could get out of school so I could watch the Champions League on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I remember waking up at 4 a.m. to watch the fixtures for the early kickoffs. And, you know, that part of my life, it feels like it's been swiped away from me a little bit. But I think we all kind of have the same reaction there. The question that I want to go to, though, the more specific one now is, how would you respond if you were the authorities involved? Because one of the big discussion points has been that the Super League clubs want to stay in the Premier League. They want to stay in La Liga. They want to stay in Serie A. What they want to do is be involved in those competitions on the weekends, and then in midweeks, instead of the Champions League, play their Super League fixtures. And there would obviously be more of them, so that might hurt the domestic cups, but they want to at least keep the Premier League and the Super League. But the Premier League and UEFA have said, if you do the Super League, we're going to kick you out. You're not invited to play in the EFL Cup, the FA Cup, the Champions League, the Club World Cup, the Premier League. You're out of those competitions. And some fans have said that's the right way to do it. They should take a hard line. Others have said that we should try to get a compromise going and keep the system going as best as we can under the Super League format. What side of the fence do you guys fall on? How would you respond if you were the authorities? We'll start with Apollo. Okay.
I think they need to take a firm stance on this. I think they need to. They've talked about the notion of banning the clubs from the Premier League. They talked about, and I think they need to do that. I think they need to follow through. You can't let them have their cake and eat it. There was a quote from the Manchester Evening News saying that they want to be in the Premier League, and then if the Super League can't start by next season, they want to be in the Champions League until the future date. They can't have it all their own way. You can't let them do that. I think that the Premier League and all the various organisations need to be firm and say, if you're doing this, you're out.
Absolutely. Vin, what do you think?
Well, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If I was in the Premier League or if I was in UEFA, I would go with the ban, the suspensions. The worst, if some people feel that's too extreme, the best thing that you can do is deduct the points from those teams this season and the season's coming, right? Okay, this season, right? Deduct the points, take them out of the European competitions, whoever it may be. City, Chelsea, take them out of the Champions League. United, Arsenal, take them out of the Europa League. Disqualify them. Deduct points, maximum number of points possible from the Premier League this season, and in the case of the Spanish and Italian teams, the La Liga and Serie A. But for the upcoming seasons, ban them. Ban them for the foreseeable future until they crawl back to the Premier League, until they crawl back to the La Liga, until they crawl back to the Serie A with their tails between their legs. That's what needs to be done. Because, like Apollo said, there's a line beyond which if you cross, you need to take strict action, and that's what's happening. Remember, this has been happening for the past 10 years now. This has been slowly brewing behind the scenes for 10 years now. Clubs have started to gain more power than the likes of UEFA, than the likes of FIFA. And I agree, the likes of UEFA and FIFA are no saints either, right? But you can't, just because they're no saints, doesn't mean that the clubs can all of a sudden accrue this overwhelming degree of power and authority over all the other clubs in Europe, not just in England, right? I mean, at some point, this has to stop. And now's the time. If you don't act now, then you might as well let them do whatever the hell they want. So now is the time to act. Now is the time that UEFA, the Premier League, the FIFA have shown that they've still got some ounce of authority and they've still got some ounce of power against these big clubs. Because if you don't act now, then it's over. Then they can do anything and everything. Then you might as well just abolish these organizations. So ban them, deduct points, do whatever you have to do.
So Apollo and Vin have both talked about a very hardline position, and that's very understandable because you have to realize, if you're a foreign fan like me, that the origins of the structure of European football from the 50s are very different than the origins of the NFL or the NBA. Those are organizations that are closed systems and have been since their inception. European football has always been a pyramid. You have the elite clubs in the Champions League, then below that, the Europa League, now the Europa Conference. You've got the leagues themselves, and then within each country, you've got a system of leagues. So the idea has always been that the smallest club in the 7th division of English football can sit there and say, if we get the right players, the right manager, the right owner, we can one day win the Premier League and be in the Champions League. The closed system that's being proposed here, and this is the most heinous part of the Super League proposal, is that the founder members, so the 15 clubs, the 12 who've announced and the 3 they want to get to join, would be permanently fixed in the Super League. Nothing could kick them out. Arsenal, for example, this season are 9th. They have been horrible. Leicester City and West Ham have been better teams than they are. They deserve more to be in European competition on merit. But under the system that is being proposed, that would not be possible. Instead, Arsenal would be a fixture no matter how badly they play. Similarly for United, if they were to miss out in another year. And that closed system is a threat to the entire governance model of football. And as Vin's saying, that's why it's such a big issue, because these clubs are amassing power and using it they've basically kind of climbed up the ladder and then pulled the ladder up after them so no one else can achieve that level. And it's a lot of us want to be very harsh on them, but one of the counter arguments tends to be that if you're harsh on them, then the fans will suffer. So how would you respond, Dan, with that in mind?
That was a very perfect transition to me, so well done for that. That was great. I do think it's salvageable. I do. Obviously, this is it's completely disgusting. It should have never happened. But I do think this, it is salvageable. While I do completely agree that the clubs should be banned from their respective competitions for the remainder of this season. But I think you then use that time to cooperate with these clubs, and it is the fans that are going to suffer. I mean, you have to remember, as hard as it is, that this is not the fault of Manchester United. This is the fault of the American owners of Manchester United and Ed Woodward. Manchester United is not the Glazers, and it is not Ed Woodward. Manchester United is a family built on tradition. To Matt Busby, Charlie Ferguson, over a century of history. It's not the club, and as well as that, it's not the fault of the team and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. That it's not them. I mean, we know, I don't know if it's a fact, but it's largely believed that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer knew nothing of this, and all of his work.
From the Chelsea press conference earlier today, Thomas Tuchel said he and his players had no idea until yesterday, and we can assume that's also true for the 11 other clubs then. And so United, Ole would not have known.
Exactly that. And then the quote that Vin just said about the players going to Fabrizio Romano for information is, it's not the fault of the teams and the players. So to ban them from, playing for their countries, potentially even in the summer before it's even started, I don't think it's very fair. I mean, you have to punish the owners. But obviously, given the fact that I don't know if they've found that it's an actual crime yet. I don't think you can, explicitly punish the owners without punishing their corporations and their businesses and hurting them financially, which is obviously the best way to hurt them and the best way to stop this. Throw bans in their faces, sanctions, and all the rest of these things. But obviously, from a fan perspective, you've watched the season go on. How we didn't have a preseason. The first 3 games are horrible, and then you've seen Ollie's work throughout the season, the progression. You've seen Mason Greenwood become a more complete player. You've seen Bruno Fernandes, and it's just sort of all the usual ups and downs of the season. And then you times it by 5 because of the schedule and because there's no fans in the ground and because it's such a crazy world right now and everyone needs that escapism. And it's just making, football such an important part of people's lives. And it just seems like all the work that the players have done and the staff have done to even keep football running, like when we didn't have football for 3 months, we was all in disarray. We had no idea what to do with ourselves. And then when it came back, we just realised how important it was to us. So all the work of the managers, the players, the staff, and everyone involved, it just gets sort of thrown up in the air, and it's not very fair on them. And that might sound like a selfish standpoint, and doing what you guys said in terms of banning them from the Premier Leagues is better for the good of the game. I don't dispute that. It probably is. But, I recognise that it might be a bit of a selfish standpoint, but I'm sort of looking after my own sort of mental health and, things like that. So, I mean, it's very hard to say what to do. I mean, I'd 100% ban them from their competition for the rest of the season and sort of use that time to cooperate and disband this fucking ridiculous idea.
In the time since last night when the news broke, I think my position's evolved a little bit on this. I used to think that it would be helpful to just ban them, kick them out immediately. What I've found since then is it would cause a tremendous amount of disarray, even more than the clubs have already created themselves right now. So my proposal, at least, would be to go ahead and let the clubs finish out the season in the Premier League, but kick them out of the UEFA competition, since this is a direct challenge to UEFA. And then at the end of the season, the Premier League would right now make a statement that if this plan is still ongoing at the end of the season, the clubs will be kicked out for next season and there will be no relegation. So those clubs would be staying up, and then obviously get 3 promoted clubs. And in the football league, you would have had 6 clubs altogether, right? So it'd be the 2 promoted clubs, 4 playoff teams. They all come up. The Big 6 are expelled if they choose to pursue this European Super League. Because while I take your point, Dan, about how punishing the fans isn't the right thing, and it's going to affect all of us negatively, the big issue, I think, is financial penalties can never match the billions they stand to earn from the Super League project. And so you can't hurt them financially. You have to hurt them in a sporting sense, whether that's points deductions, bans, relegations, whatever it is. And that's going to hurt the fans too. But for the good of the game, that's the only way to approach it, because this closed club at the top it's just not acceptable. Apollo, how would you kind of balance those concerns?
I kind of have a question actually before we continue with that. So in the proposal you just suggested, what would you do about the finishing off the domestic cups? Because do you finish those as well, or do you cancel them along with the UEFA, along with the European competitions?
It's very nuanced. I mean, I wouldn't be against just kicking them all out of the league right now either. The only reason why I suggest maybe not doing that is to give them a warning period that they would have to back out of this project. So it'd be 6 weeks right now, right, until the end of the season. And the other reason why I suggest this is because of the broadcasting chaos with contracts. But for me, I think you'd have to continue the domestic season, because technically speaking, the Super League is not a direct threat to those. It is in the sense that we all want it to be, and the leagues have threatened that they will kick them out. But if we listen to the Super League clubs, the cups would not be canceled immediately. The Premier League would not be gone. They just want to get rid of the Champions League. And so the Champions League and the Europa League have to be more strict with them, I think, than the domestic organizations do.
Yeah, but then where does it? Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to say, but then where does it stop? Like, where do you stop this? At some point, today it's UF. Today it's UF. It's a fight against UF. It's against. So you're saying, okay, ban them from UEFA competition. What if tomorrow they go on and do something similar with Premier League? Then you're gonna have to ban them, right? So at some point, where is the line?
Well, I'm not.
For me, the line's already been crossed.
I'm just saying, don't ban them right away. I'm saying give them 6 weeks to back out of this project, essentially, or negotiate a compromise. I'm not saying don't ban them. I'm just saying don't ban them yet. I'm fully in favor of a ban. I think if at the end of the season United say we're sticking to the Super League, they should be expelled from the Premier League, and if they choose to come back, they have to start in non-league.
On that, I think that's quite a good idea, because, I mean, given the fact that the owners of this club live in a bubble, they're so disconnected from the real world, in their dystopian world of billions and billions of pounds, they have no idea what it's like to be a football fan, and they have no idea the traditions and the values of these clubs. So, they put this, apart from maybe Florentino Perez, I think is probably the one that would have the most sort of idea. But obviously, given that, they could put this out, they could see the reaction that's happening from 99.99% of the world of football, and some of them might be sitting there thinking, shit, what have we done? So I think, as Resurgent said, I think that's quite a good idea. You give them 6 weeks, and you sort of have to give them benefit of the doubt, sort of realise their mistakes, like putting the child in the naughty corner and realising his mistakes. I do think that's a good idea, and I do agree with that. Because of the reaction to the football world, I mean, from a fan perspective, from our perspective, couldn't have been better. You've got coaches coming out saying they don't agree with it. You've got managers coming out and saying it. Bruno Fernandes came out and said he didn't want it. He's our most popular player. That's huge. If every one of these players can rally together, you could even argue, you can even ask the 12 captains of the clubs to come out with a joint statement, disbanding this competition. And the 6 weeks is a good idea as well, because then it doesn't hurt the players either. If you come out and you could even work with the PFA, players could work with the PFA, and there could be direct contact between the clubs and the PFA, and the PFA can say, look, players don't want this, and then there could be sort of a time of negotiation between the players and the clubs and the Premier League and all these sort of competitions. So I think an immediate ban would not be helpful, but rather more harmful, because obviously, we know that communication is key in these types of things.
Yeah, I think you summed it up nicely there. The issue is ultimately this can't be allowed to go on. They do have to respond, the authorities, but they can't just kick them out immediately. Otherwise, it would create even more chaos. So there has to be some kind of balanced approach. And obviously, there will be different solutions on how to do that. But ultimately, that's going to have to be figured out. All right, so now I want to go ahead and transition to another topic that's frequently come up, which is how these 12 clubs have decided they're the 12 leading clubs of European football. Because something I've seen commonly pointed out on social media is Nottingham Forest won the European Cup twice under Brian Clough. In the late 60s, early 70s, the big rivalry in English football was Don Revie's Leeds against Brian Clough's Derby County. So there's been different big clubs at different points throughout history. Newcastle United in the 90s were fighting with us for the league title under Kevin Keegan. But today, would anyone say they're a super club and deserve to be in this group? That natural up and down cycle they're trying to arrest that and kind of say whoever's big in 2021 should remain big for all of posterity. And that really speaks to it. So I think the question is around how these 12 clubs were chosen and the process around that. I know Vin had something to say about it.
Yeah, so I was just trying to go through some of the quotes that sources closest to the league have come out, and they say that all they want to do, the main purpose is to maximize revenue and profit, and the concern for the greater good of the game is secondary for them. And the fact that the fans are backlashing and the response is so vitriolic is not a primary concern for them. And it just goes to show that they've basically picked out these clubs based on their financial ability and their financial machines. You look at Arsenal, Sam Kroenke's come out and said he doesn't understand what the fuss is all about. And he's saying that given time, over the course of time, the fans are going to embrace the concept and love this wonderful idea of taking football to the next level. I mean, mate, you're not even in the Champions League. You are struggling to get in the Europa League. You're struggling in the league, and you think that you deserve to be in a competition where you don't get relegated and you get to play the best of teams. Tottenham Hotspur, they got kicked out of the Europa League. They're not then the Champions League. Just because they've got a huge stadium and they've sort of revamped their facilities and they've got in a big manager who, by the way, is not there anymore. And suddenly they've decided to sort of pretend that they're a big club. Now, all of a sudden, they get this right to be in a so-called pseudo super league where they get to play the best of teams and not get relegated. Like, how does that work? It's quite clear that it's purely based on the financial capacity and the financial machines that these clubs employ and operate. And yeah, it's an absolute disgrace. And the reactions are quite understandable and rightly so.
Apollo, how about you?
They've basically decided it on which clubs are worth the most money, and that allegedly makes you a big club. And for the clubs that Vin mentioned, like even Spurs, it's almost they're in it because they are lucky enough to have been in the Premier League and get the financial benefits that comes with that. They're not in it because they deserve to be in it. So and that notion of it being financially motivated of who gets in it really sums the whole thing up. It's all about money. It's not about the football.
Definitely, Dan.
First of all, the reason football is so good is because it's organic. Okay, you grow up as a child, you dream of playing in the Premier League. One of the greatest stories of recent times is Leicester winning the Premier League. They went to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. That is what makes football. It is not money. It is not players. It is none of this crap. Football is so brilliant because it's so unpredictable. You could have minnows, like for example FC Rostov, and they can go beat Juventus in the Champions League, and that's what makes it so good. You know, and you're trying to script this. They're trying these big fucking conglomerate companies and clubs they're in a little rich boys club away from the rest of football. You know, it's not right. No one has a divine right to call themselves a big club. You know, as we know, Aston Villa won Champions Leagues, Nottingham Forest won Champions League. No one has the right to be to play in these types of games, and to call themselves a big club just because they've got money. You as a club, you should grow from nothing. You grow into a big club. Finances don't make you a big club. It's your fan base, it's your history, it's your trophies. It's a collaboration of everything that makes you a big club. How much money you have does not. I personally, I don't know, about maybe the last couple of years, City have sort of cemented their status as a big club just because of the sort of trophies they've got and things like that. But when City's owners bought a City, and that didn't make them a big club just because they had money. No one has a divine right to call themselves a big club. None of these clubs do. My club don't have the right to call themselves a big club. I mean, of course we are one of the biggest in the world, but we don't get to decide that. And the fact that these rich boys have made a club of big clubs is an insult to football in itself, and as an organic thing, which it should absolutely be.
People say that they're the biggest clubs, they always will be in terms of the fan bases, but that's not true. You look at the amount of support Newcastle United had outside of the northeast of England in the 90s is entirely different to what it is today. And that's the biggest thing. It almost feels like they're trying to arrest the big club status at this point in time. Even then, if you look at it, they're big, they're not the most successful. And I think that's part of what's driving this. Is you look at, for example, Leicester City, they've won the Premier League more recently than us. They've won it more recently than Arsenal and Tottenham. So they've been more successful of late. They're not as successful as we are on the whole, but they've been a better team over the last, let's say, since they were promoted. On the whole, Leicester have been a more successful club than Manchester United. That doesn't mean that Leicester City should be permanently affixed into big club status, but it does show that United shouldn't be either. Football, the beauty of this sport, as compared to other sports, especially American sports, is that you have the ability to go from being the best to the worst, or the worst to the best. Nothing is ever guaranteed. Every match matters. And in a Super League, you lose that, and that's the shameful part of it. And as you guys said, it's the big boys kind of driving things on their own to keep themselves the big boys. They don't want any more Manchester Cities. They don't want any more PSGs. They don't want any more Tottenham Hotspurs even organically building their way up. Because if you look at it, Spurs wouldn't have been in a Super League if this was started in 2010 or even 2013 before Pochettino got there. There's no way. The reason Spurs are in this is because they were successful under Pochettino, and they've got a couple of big name players and a big stadium now as a result. And it's a shame that that's the way football is going. But yeah, I totally agree with your guys' points on that.
Just to put one thing before you go ahead, Sergeant. Nottingham Forest have won 2 European Cups, which is essentially Champions League, right?
Absolutely.
Man City, Atletico Madrid, Arsenal, Tottenham have combined 1 not. So it just goes to show that even if you're a small club which has got a rich history and a rich pedigree and a rich legacy, it doesn't matter because you're not financially successful. And that's where the Americanization of football comes into play.
Absolutely. So now we're going to move on to our kind of concluding topic for the day, which is this concept of how are we going to feel about the club in any given scenario, but we'll stick with the two at the extremes basically, because there's obviously so much of a spectrum of what could happen in between. So on the one hand, you could have United basically get what they want and the Super League is formed and midweek fixtures come in to replace the Champions League, and the Premier League continues on the weekends as it always has been. And in that scenario, how would you guys respond, Dan?
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult, and it is going to be each to their own. Everyone feels differently about it, and for a lot of people like myself that have followed the club for their entire lives, it's going to be incredibly difficult to just leave it all behind, because obviously we know as fans it's not just a club, it's your way of life essentially, isn't it? You sort of plan your week around it, you look forward to it. I think for me, because whispers have been coming out for a long time, but you've been hearing different things from different people, and I heard it, but I sort of thought, nah, that would never happen, that sort of thing. And now everything sort of comes to the fray, and you see the structure of it, It's just awful. And I think the big thing for me, it was the Premier League statement saying we'll be banned from the Premier League. Because, you know, the idea of something to replace the Champions League, obviously we know that's not ideal and it is so horrible. But, you know, to fundamentally change the way that the game is played, if they went ahead and did this, just playing in a Super League, you know, not playing in the Premier League, not playing in the Cups, that's not football, is it? It completely changes the fundamentals of how the game is to be played. You know, that was the big thing for me. And I really don't know. I mean, you know, I think it would take time for everyone to sort of work out their own ethical stance on it. So for me now, I'm going to have to sit on the fence because, I mean, you know, I've supported this club my entire life. For me to just sit here and say, you know, if this happens, we manage to stay in the Premier League and we get the Super League, for me to sit here and say right now, the day after it all kicks off, that I won't support this club anymore, you know, when in a few months to come, I could feel completely different about that. So, you know, I'm going to have to sit on the fence for this.
Yeah, one of the things that stands out to me is if the club get their way and we do end up with the Premier League and the Super League participation occurring simultaneously, the clubs are going to prioritize their financially lucrative Super League. And so the Premier League will see a lot of weakened squads, almost similar to how we do in the EFL Cup. And then given that our participation in the Super League will be fixed, you end up in a situation where there's no lows because we're not going to get relegated realistically. That's just, it's not possible given how much money we have and will gain in the Super League scenario. Can't get relegated. If we're not competing for the league title, the league games basically become one giant waste of time. So it takes away all meaning in that competition. And it makes it so much harder to support, even if we do stay in the Premier League. But Vin, what do you think?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because a lot of us have been supporting this club for 10 plus years, right? Some of us have been supporting it since we were born in our nappies. And I'm not from Manchester. I don't hold a season ticket. I haven't been to Old Trafford in my life yet. And I still fell in love with this club 14 years ago. And all of a sudden, I fell in love with the history, the legacy, the journey of the club, you know, the Munich disaster, everything. It was so unique and it was so organic, as Dan said. And now you have all of it just being tarnished, undone, and you have capitalism just being pissed all over it. And it's difficult because United have come out and said a couple of hours ago that they want to play the Premier League, but they also want to play the Super League. And so it's like it's a complete loggerheads, and you have no idea what's going to happen. Obviously, like I said, relegation is obviously an unrealistic possibility if we're being honest with ourselves. But yeah, it's tough. And the most important thing is fans have lost the trust of the people in the club. They don't trust people in the club anymore. They trust the players, they trust the managers because we know that they're on our side. But you can't trust the people running the club. You can't trust the owners. You can't trust the executives, the administrators, the directors, any of them. And so it becomes a conflict essentially within ourselves. Like, yes, we want to support the players and the manager playing for the club, but then at the same time, you know, behind the scenes, you have these greedy executives who are plotting this concept of a super league just to be financially lucrative. And so you don't know what the club stands for anymore. Does it truly stand for the badge that it has, as it has been for the past 70 to 100 years? We don't know that anymore. It's all gone up for a toss, and it's difficult. I mean, obviously you can't go ahead and say, oh, I'm not going to watch football, I'm not going to watch Manchester United at all, because you are going to be tempted at some point, right? No matter how hard you try, at some point in the future, you're going to be like, okay, I need to see what's going on. I need to know what's going on. I need to follow, just to fill that void inside. And yeah, it's a really emotional, complicated situation as a fan personally.
Paulo, what do you have to say about that?
I completely get the notion that you can't conclusively say you're going to do this, you don't know because you don't know how you're going to feel down the line. But I suppose all I can really do is answer how I feel right now, and that is that I think you have to draw the line somewhere, and supporting the Super League would be going against everything we believe in about football. So I feel like if we were in it, that I don't feel like I could support the club through that, because you have to draw the line. And I'm not saying I'm going to go and support somebody else. I'm just saying that you would stop the support for the club, in the sense of you can't advocate for that. You have to draw the line somewhere. And then conversely, because we talked about the opposite scenarios, if this didn't happen and the UEFA and whatever managed to get them to reverse their decision, I feel you have to take into account that the players, the manager, they didn't know about this. This is not on them. This is on the owners. So I feel like it is acceptable in that situation to go back to the club, because you shouldn't be holding against the players what the owners did, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. One of the big issues is in all of these different scenarios, the limited trust that the club had rebuilt over the last couple of weeks with the appointment of the director of football, the football director, bringing in ex-players to help run the club, any kind of limited belief that we had that Ed Woodward and the Glazers were stewards that were going to at least not suck us any more dry than they already have with the loans and the dividend payments. That trust is now gone, no matter what happens from here, because we know they wanted to do this, and that you just know you can't trust them. They're snakes, as the president of UEFA said. But for me, the decision on how my support goes in the future, I think, really depends on what happens with the Premier League more than what happens with the Super League. The way I look at it is, if this completely falls on its face and things continue with the new Champions League and that's it, then, oh well, nothing's changed. The owners are greedy. We already knew that. In a scenario where the Super League starts and we stay in the Premier League, then what's going to happen is they'll have removed all of the potential lows and downsides of being in football. And obviously, as we know from studying emotion at all, it's feeling sad, feeling depressed, having those lows, feeling miserable when Aguero scores at the last minute to win City the title, feeling awful when David Moyes is putting in 82 crosses and you're not even playing the Europa League next season. It's those lows that make all of the highs so meaningful. And we've talked about that on this podcast before, that the title under Ollie would feel so sweet because we've been through all that more than the title previously in our lifetimes. And if we take that out, then obviously we'd still support the club, but it wouldn't really mean as much anymore. The third scenario is the one I find the most interesting, though, which is the one where everyone follows through on all of their threats. And Manchester United exists as a club that only plays in the Super League. It has been expelled from all other competitions. And in that scenario, the Super League really just doesn't interest me. And I think I'd probably spend my time on other competitions. I'd watch the Bundesliga, Ligue 1, watch the MLS a little bit if I can get over the lack of quality here. And I think that's more where I'd end up leaning, because I have no interest in just watching United play Real Madrid every week for the next 23 years.
And for me, in that situation, it's more like you're just watching out of an interest for the game. You're not saying I'm supporting someone else. You're just watching to watch football.
Yeah, I totally agree. A club that exists only in a rich boys club Super League is not a football club. That's not the club that I grew up with. Even now, knowing they want to do this, it's almost sort of recognizable given the values and the history of this club. You never thought anything like this would ever happen. Really, it's sort of a worst case scenario. We knew the Glazers and what they were doing; they were milking the club dry. But as Resurgent said, and as I mentioned earlier, I got lulled in, this false sense of ambition with the appointments of the director of football, and you thought maybe they're going to start doing things the right way, and then they just sort of, and like we're having a very good season as well. We can't forget that the progression, and we've already matched last season's points total as well. We just come off of a really good Greenwood just got a brace. We should be thinking about that. We should all be sharing gifs and videos of Mason Greenwood making the fucking referee. That's what we should be doing on this Monday afternoon. Not this. This is, there's a definite sense of irreparable damage that's been done. I mean, no one likes Glazers. Love United Hate Glazers has been around for more than 10 years now. Yeah. But this, I think it really, really pushes it over the edge. And, over the past year or so, LUHD has been quiet. It has, because the team's been doing well. I mean, none of us like the Glazers. Everybody wants them out, but you have to admit they have been quiet, and it's because the team have been doing well. I mean, obviously, the loudest they are is usually in the transfer market anyway. But obviously, that's not the point. They have been quiet because the team has been doing well. But if it all falls on its face now, and we go back to the Champions League, the Premier League, the FA Cup, the structure as it is now, it will take me many, many months to feel the same. I'll still watch the games. I'll still love the club as much as I do. But, the instant that this sort of came out yesterday, I think it was maybe just before the game and during it, it sucked my passion for it straight away. I was sitting there watching the game, but, my phone was in my left hand because I was checking for updates on what the fuck was going on with my club. Even when we scored, obviously I loved it, but the passion was 10% of what it would be, because you're sitting there wondering what the hell is going on. The
thing that
Sorry,
Vin, go ahead.
No, I just want to just fill in that just like what Dan said, today we should be discussing about the Burnley game and how Mason Greenwood scored 2 amazing goals, and the exchange between Pogba and John Moss, where John Moss is telling Pogba to stop taking the piss, and Pogba's saying, "I'm just playing the game." And just those kind of incidents. We should be talking about that. We should be talking about the Leeds game, and instead we're talking about this nonsense. And just to mention the timing of this announcement, remember, we're still in a pandemic-affected economic market where a lot of the clubs are still struggling to make their financial ends meet. You have a lot of the lower clubs as well who are recovering, but they're still not on the good side of things, and they're still struggling. And in such a situation, you come out with things saying, "Oh, you're going to get a signing on bonus of 300 million euros." How's that going to work? Arsenal, Arsenal, for example, they had to lay off 55 people out of their jobs, and now they're talking about getting a slice of the 3.5 billion initial upfront investment. I mean, what's that all about? And it just, and like Desurgent, like you said, if things go through a third scenario where everyone follows on their threats, and players don't get to play international football, they don't get to be a part of UEFA, they don't get to be a part of Premier League, what's left? The MLS? Like you mentioned, there's a lack of quality in MLS. There could be a real possibility that those clubs playing in the Super League would also be signed up for the MLS clubs then in the future. There's a real possibility that happens, that those players go on to be signed up by the MLS, and the MLS all of a sudden becomes one of the biggest leagues in the world, which it just doesn't sit right with me, the whole thing.
The thing that constantly has been coming into my mind since yesterday when the news broke is, growing up, the one thing that I always heard, there was a radio show here in the US with a Scotsman and an Englishman called World Soccer Daily. And I used to listen in, and the one thing they would always tell people who were trying to get into the sport is, pick your team carefully. You can change your wife, you can change everything, but you can't change your football team. But the thing that kind of has been in my mind since yesterday is, we're not leaving our club. That's not going to happen. We never will. The values that we believe in are the same, and that can never change. But is our club leaving us in a way? Are we being left behind? And to that point, actually, there was a quote that came out today that these big clubs, the 12 of them, the Dirty Dozen, view us as legacy fans. They want to attract the young people, the FIFA generation, who are looking for superstars and just constant big club versus big club battles. Basically, in a way, this is the FIFA ultimate teamization of football, and they want to be on the edge of that, and we're considered collateral damage for it. And, you know, I don't play FIFA as much as I used to. I still do sometimes, but I don't play Ultimate Team. I'll play career mode. It gets neglected, but I'll play it a little bit here and there. And I feel like that might be how things go with United. If they become a Super League only product, then at that point, I'm not interested in that. So while I'm still going to watch, probably, I don't think I would do it with the same feeling or regularity.
I mean, the weird thing about this is that I don't think any of these clubs understand that if they do this, then football dies. You know, if they don't remain in their respective leagues and the broadcast money doesn't go to these companies, doesn't go out the football league, and it doesn't ultimately go into grassroots. You know, these grassroots, these Sunday league clubs with these children, they don't exist. And if children are not playing football, the sport of football dies. And I mean, unless they're going to be in their own sort of bubble in this Super League where they're farming and breeding fucking kids, you know what I mean? To do this, the sport is going to die. And I mean, I know nothing's come out yet about nothing's come out yet about it, about how they're going to sort of tackle this. Sorry, I went a bit off track.
It's all right.
But you know, that's just what's going to happen. You know, there's no money in the Premier League means no money in the Football League means no money at grassroots. If kids are not growing up falling in love with this game, then the sport dies and it becomes a product, as we're seeing right before our eyes. That, you know.
So, Dan, we can't hear you right now.
Apologies.
Okay.
You know, the sport is becoming a product right before our very eyes, and it's horrible to see. Because there's a football purist, we're all football purists. You know, we love football for what it is. I mean, you know, there's a couple of weeks ago, you know, what was it, the Juventus Porto game in the Champions League? You know, that was a brilliant advert for football. I mean, I just chose that because it was very recent, and you know, it sort of displayed everything that football's about. And without that, you know, that organic, the organic materials of football, without the kids growing up, desperate to make this their life's work, and you know, go up through the ranks, the sports development pyramid into the academies, football just doesn't work. And it's just not what it is.
Let me just give you guys a little bit of a glimpse into the future that Dan was alluding to just now. In the NFL, there's 32 clubs that have their teams, and that's it. And then below that, there are football teams in America, but those leagues are very poorly funded. They don't really have great competition. They tend not to survive from time to time. They tend to fold every year or two. And the result of that is basically there's just these 32 teams that just hoover up anyone who has the requisite level of talent, and everyone else is left to kind of exist below that in a sub meaningful existence. And I think that's what the Super League would do to the Premier League and to the domestic leagues in general. It would say, okay, you know what, Leicester City, Aston Villa, these clubs will survive, but what will end up happening is Jack Grealish will leave, players like that will leave, and you'll end up with teams that are not very good and will exist purely as breeding grounds for Super League players. And that is just, it's absolutely disgusting to me, because as Dan was alluding to, that Juventus Porto game, or MK Dons beating us 4-0 under LVG, you know, these kind of upsets and the openness of football are what makes this game beautiful and special. The idea that anyone at the top could be at the bottom in 10 years, and anyone at the bottom could be at the top with the right financial backing, the right management, right players, and just losing that would be a death blow to the soul of the game. And that's the really depressing part.
That's exactly what it is. Football's soul is very much up for sale. You know, and as a football fan, someone who's followed football for my entire life, it feels like someone's just, you know, just ripped my heart completely out my chest. You know, for all in the favour of what? Money. Money. You know, money means absolutely fuck all to me. Who's benefited from this apart from the owners of these big clubs? I don't care about the product. I don't want to watch it. If we're purely a Super League team, I don't want that. That sounds like the most dystopian future ever, in which, you know, the elites, you know, are all in a little club. You know, it's football stratification is exactly what it is, going back to the fucking 1300s. You know, the rich and the poor, the stratification, it still exists today on those sort of values. You know, I can't, you know, I've been quite sort of like mixing words up on this pod a bit, but it's also new, and I'm still sort of getting my head around the whole thing, because it's just something that I would have never imagined would have happened in football. I mean, maybe I see things from a positive perspective too much, and I don't look at the sort of the seedy underbelly of things, and I sort of see things as through a lens of optimism. And we know this has been going on for years, and we know what these businessmen are like, but I think it still knocks us for six.
Well, I think you speak for everyone there when you say that. Obviously, I want to see if anyone has any final thoughts. We've got a couple of minutes left, but the other thing that I want to do is we always end on a prediction. So I want to just go ahead and get everyone's prediction, how you think this is going to play out in the coming months. And we'll go ahead and start with the man who is laughing himself, Vin.
Predictions. Oh, wow. Wow. I don't really know how it's gonna play out. I have zero idea at this point. None of us have an idea of how
Well, then let me ask you, how would you like it to play out?
Well, obviously, I like this idea to be scraped. The idea of a Super League completely scraped. Things stay normal as it is, but then these clubs which were involved in the idea to be punished in some form, right? Because if this goes unscathed, if none of these clubs just come back, they just revert to normal as it is and just go on, proceed with the league, with the season as it is, then what the hell was this fuss all for, right? So you want to get them back, cool, but you got to punish the owners, and in whichever form. If the Premier League deems it fair to dock points from the league, or sort of remove them out of cup competitions, or UEFA does the same thing. While it would hurt us as fans and in regards to players and managers, but it might be a necessary step. So, I mean, we should have seen this coming in 2005. We should have seen this coming in 2005.
A lot of people did, and that's why the Glazer buyout was so opposed. But Apollo, what do you think? What do you see happening? What would you like to see happen?
Well, I personally can't remember a situation where football fans as a whole have been so united over something. Everyone hates this. So I would hope that sheer level of opposition would stop this from going ahead, whether it takes, I don't know, a few weeks for them to realise just how opposed to this people are. So I would hope that would be the case. Whether or not that actually happens, I really don't know. But I'd hope that they listen to reason of so many people are against this. It's not as if it's like 50-50 or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, what do you think? What's happening? What do you want to happen?
My absolute ideal scenario would be what I mentioned earlier, with the clubs sort of banned from their respective competitions for the rest of this season, and I would like the what the British government are talking about, the 50+1 rules come in. I mean, obviously, please keep in mind that I don't know how you implement that. I don't know if it can be implemented, but as my ideal scenario is, the Super League is scrapped. Teams are banned for the rest of the season, possibly fined heavily, and for the government to implement the 50+1 and make the Glazers obviously give the shares back. They have to implement that, give the fans the voting power, because I mean, it doesn't look like they're going anywhere. But at least if we have fans and voting power, at least we have a say in how the clubs run.
That would be a dream scenario, obviously, with the 50+1 like they have in the Bundesliga. Unfortunately, I can't really see it happening, given the ridiculous amount of organizational issues it would cause. What I think is more likely, unfortunately, is that the clubs get what they want and the Super League continues in midweek with some tweaked formatting and compromises around that. And the Premier League continues on the weekends. It would probably be the death of the League Cup. And then in a few years' time, the FA Cup would probably get slowly phased out. And the game would kind of become this bizarre hybrid model where the clubs are affixed where they want to be. What I'd like to see happen is quite the opposite, actually. Similar to what Vin was saying, I'd like to see this entire thing scrapped. And then I want to see the owners financially punished, and the clubs, I think, do need a sporting punishment as well for kind of bringing disrepute to the game in a way. So the way I would, in my dream scenario, would be this whole thing gets scrapped by the summer, and then all of the teams who are involved basically have this season shelved in a way. They don't get, so if you were top of the league, you don't win the league. You don't qualify for European competition, whatever that would be on a sporting side. And then as far as financial penalties goes, 1 year of TV revenue from the leagues or in the Champions League, just don't give it to those clubs. They're fined those values, which would be about 100 million pounds or plus, and that would be massively impactful to the pocketbooks. A 5-10 million pound fine simply won't cut it. To the owners who are billionaires, who are trying to become multi-billionaires, those are not going to be meaningful sums, and ultimately it's going to take a huge financial hit to swing them. Any final thoughts in this last minute, or shall we wrap up?
No, I think.
All right.
Just,
I can't wait for Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
I can't wait for it.
Well, in that case, you guys have been listening to a very depressing episode of the Red Devil's Den podcast. Please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as follow us on your preferred podcast platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, JioSaavn, whatever it may happen to be. And we look forward to speaking to you again with hopefully more cheery news about the future in the coming days. Thank you for listening.